Hi, I'm Richie Castellano. Welcome to my studio. I've gotten a few requests to do some metal sounds, so today we're going to make an all-metal bank using the Line 6 Dream Rig, which is the JTV Variax guitar, the Pod HD-500X, and the L2 StageSource Speaker. So let's go over the sounds I have in this bank. I have Creepy 12, which sounds like this. Then I have a clean comp. Now I have a drop-tuned dual cab setup. And then I have mid-lead. So let's take a look at how we did that. We're looking at the Pod HD-500X editing software. The first sound I had in my bank was the creepy 12 string. Okay, so let's take a look what's going on there. If we go to the mixer page, I have the U Acoustic 2 model. So when I hit that pedal, it changes the model on this. Okay, so that sounds pretty good on its own. Let's turn all the effects off so you can hear it. That sounds fine by itself, but I like to spruce it up a bit. So the first thing I put on was a compressor. And I used this blue comp Treb compressor. I really liked what it did to the attack. And it brightened things up too. But I thought it was a bit too bright. So after that, I put a parametric EQ. I boosted the lows, cut some of the highs, and also cut some of the high mids here, just a bit. So that sounds like this. So here's before. And here's after. Next, I put this cool sweeping phaser. I think that's a default too. I just left it. The next thing I added was this tape echo. I like this. It was too bright to my ears, so I brought down the treble a bit. And then I put the whole thing through a hall reverb. This hall reverb defaults with a pretty hefty pre-delay. Pre-delay is how long the reverb takes to kick in after the initial sound. So I turned that all the way down. I liked the way that sounded better. Gave it more of a pad kind of feel, which I liked. All right, so that's the Creepy 12. Let's move on to clean comp here. All right, clean comp. The first thing here to notice is that I'm using a different guitar model. I'm using Spank 3, which is pretty much a Strat in the middle position. An interesting thing that you can do with this that you really can't do with a lot of other setups is you can change amps with every pedal that you press. A lot of the times when you get a high gain amp, it has an awesome distorted sound and the clean sounds like a bit of an afterthought. But with a modeling amp setup, you can choose a specific amp model just for clean. You're not stuck with sort of like a tacked on clean sound. So for this clean sound, I'm using the Blackface Lux Vibrato. And that's like a deluxe sort of a vibrato amp. Here's how I set up the amp. It's pretty clean. Let's turn everything off but the amp. Here's what just the amp sounds like. Sounds pretty good. There's a tiny bit of breakup, and you can change that to taste, obviously. I always start off with a gate when I know I'm going to be doing a lot of either distortion or compression. So I put on the default gate there. Now we have a tube comp, which I love. And I put that after the amp. You can use your own ears to what you like better, whether you want to put it before the amp or after the amp. I put it right here because I didn't want the compressor to push the amp. I wanted the amp to sound clean, but I wanted to squash the dynamics so when I play lighter, it'll come out. That's off. That's on. And here is off. So it makes a difference. Before the amp, I put a chorus. And I just basically brought the mix down and made it a little slower than the default. and I put a plate reverb on here, and I left it pretty much as is. Okay, so that's clean comp. All right, now we have this dual cab drop C sound that I made. Now, if you notice here, this is a dual amp setup. The first thing we're going to look at is the guitar, though. I'm using the Lester bridge position. Okay, something's going on here. I have custom tunings. So if we look over here on the custom tuning panel, I have the 6th string tuned down to a C, 5 G, C, F, A, D. So basically the whole guitar is down a whole step with a dropped C. Okay, so now let's go to the amps. I'm going to turn everything off but the amps. Okay, so right away you're going to hear that there's quite a bit of noise. So you want a noise gate. And since we're doing like sort of a really heavy rhythmic sort of playing, I'm using the hard gate. And I put everything pretty fast. It only has an 8 millisecond delay because I want, when I go, I want it to be done, the sound. I don't want any ring over. Okay, so now the first amp I used is the tread plate model. And I also changed some of the parameters here. I decided I wanted to use the 4x12 XXL V30 cabinet on both of those. I just thought it sounded a little bit heavier than what I was going for. On the tread plate amp, I'm using a 67 condenser. And on the other amp, I used the Bomber amp, the Bomber Uber. I used the 4038 ribbon. I thought that sounded good to me. I also messed with some of these amp parameters. I turned the sag down on the Bomber, turned the bias up a little bit. This just goes to taste, you know what I mean? It's very subtle. You might not hear a difference at all, but it's more of a feeling thing to me. Okay, now cab parameters I changed also. I raised the resonance level on both of them and the thump a little bit, and I turned the decay all the way down. I want the cabinets to be very tight sounding for a sound like this. So that's just the amp by itself. Then I put EQs after both of the amps to try to get them to do what I wanted. So this EQ sort of brightens it up a bit. And the other EQ does pretty much the same thing. Actually, I did the opposite here. I kind of took out some of the mud. And then before this, I put a screamer distortion. So that's how I got that sound. All right, let's go over to the controller page. All right, here I just put the screamer on foot switch 1, so I can turn that on and off within the preset. That's pretty easy to do. Okay, so now let's move over to my lead sound. So here's my sound. Okay, let's see what's going on here. First thing, the guitar model is the Lester 5. I'd probably keep this guitar on the Lester bank so I can go back and forth between bridge pickup and neck pickup, but it defaults to this, which is kind of convenient. Let's turn the effects off so you can hear the amp. I'm using the Angel F-Ball. I have the drive up really high. Here are my settings. I didn't mess with the amp or the cabinet parameters, but I did change the mic, if I remember. Pretty dirty. All right, the next thing I put right after the amp is this EQ. So here's without it. And that's just pretty much a mid boost. If you're playing a lead and you hear that your notes are getting lost, it's nice to have a pedal that you can hit that's going to goose up the mids so you cut through the mix a little better. And you could, adjust the frequency here. I'm using the parametric EQ because it makes it really easy to do this. This is the frequency you're boosting. So if you're playing up here all the time and you want to boost a different frequency, you can. It's all depending on how you play. Here, before the amp, I put a screamer. So if I'm playing and I really want more sustain, I have it. It's right there. After, I put a regular stereo delay, and so basically what I did here is I picked a time. That's 22%. Oh, here it is. Okay, so here I have I had 275 here, and I have 550 here. So I took the left time and doubled it in the right time, and then I tailored the feedback so I get a good back and forth. So that's the idea behind that. And obviously, when you're doing a high gain sound, you got to have a noise gate. Okay, one more thing I didn't mention here is the weeper. I have a wah going pretty much at the front of my signal chain after the noise gate. So I turn that on with the toe switch on the actual pod. So let's check it out. Okay, over on the pod, I'm going to hit view, and that's going to let me know which buttons control which effects. Over here, my creepy 12-string, I have EQ, dynamics, modulation, delay. So if I'm doing like a passage and I don't want to use that phaser, I can shut it off. And you can customize this to your own taste. You can pick whatever button you want to control whichever effect. Okay, over here on clean comp, I have modulation, dynamics, and reverb. So again, I can turn off that modulation. Okay, on the dual cab, I just have a distortion. So here's with the distortion off. So if you want a little more articulation, you might want to keep that off. But if you want more sustain, now finally on my mid-lead sound, I have a couple things happening. Over here I have my volume boost, and it's on because this is basically a volume pedal that's down 20%. And it's not hooked up to any of these pedals or anything. It's just a simple button press. So that's just 20% volume boost when I turn this off. It's kind of counterintuitive, but you have to keep that in your head. So over here I have distortion. So if I want more sustain, then I have my mid boost. And I have my delay. And if I push in, so let's hear it with the full effect. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. See you next time.